So I'm Rik Turnbull from XR Bootcamp. I'll walk you through how to prepare and submit your Spatial SDK apps in Android Studio. Now, we're a little bit there's an advantage here because sort of Android Studio is already kind of an APK making machine. So it's kind of natively part of Android Studio to build and deploy those things. So I'll just briefly walk through how to do it. It's pretty straightforward to create a release version of your application, but also I'll point out some of the things that are kind of unique to the Quest build. So I think first thing to note is around the Android manifest. So I think unlike some of those other toolkits, we're kind of like handcrafting the Android manifest. Now, if you're checking out the guidelines around what that manifest should look like, then in here there's various settings that you need to make sure are in place around kind of the minimum and target SDK versions, setting installation location to auto, ensuring that the head tracking feature is available, the label's correct, and the activities are set up. So essentially what we need to do is make sure that all these settings are good for our release. So inside this kind of snippet, if you like, I've captured kind of the core parts of that. The correct namespaces for each one of these to set them up correctly as required. I think one thing to note around the manifest file that's built with Android Studio is that some of these attributes could be overwritten by the Gradle file during the build. And these ones highlighted in red, if I show you an example build setting, then the application ID will be mapped to the package, the min and SDK target SDKs into the Android namespace, and then the version code and the version name will get mapped across as well. So when you're uploading a release version into the portal, then when you need to bump your version number, make sure you do it in your build here and not inside the manifest, because this is the one that will overwrite it. I do have an app inside Studio. Hopefully you can see that. I had problems zooming in last time with this. But essentially the build Gradle here, I've got the version code here is set to 3, and in the manifest file it's set to 1. But there's actually a tab at the bottom in Studio, which will show you the merged manifest. So the merged manifest contains what this looks like, what it looks like after the build, as a combination of the settings that are in your Gradle file, but also any kind of plugins that you might have that might add their own settings into this file. So mainly what you're doing is checking that this merge manifest is following all the compliant rules. Make sure it's good. So one thing you may have noticed in there is just a simple kind of API key pattern. So as we discussed, for sort of testing purposes, or for these competition channels, then adding sort of API keys or compiling them in is the way to go. But then make sure that you remove those keys once everything's done. So you can use this pattern to essentially have a local secrets file where you're storing any keys or any secrets for your app that's obviously not checked into GitHub at all. And then this pattern will fetch a particular string out of the properties file where you can use it. So in here it will generate. I have an app that uses Gemini and Mapbox, so it gets the Gemini API key, the Mapbox token out of the file to be used. So during build time, and then it will create me a class which I can then kind of use in my application, and then it's compiled into the app. So it's kind of like convenient, so that inside the application itself, I can just refer to the key quite simply in code. And the secrets, this is just an example of what the file looks like, is kind of held here, which is outside of Git. I'll come back to the key store password and details as well shortly, but that's a convenient way to do those as well. One kind of gotcha around building releases for Quest is the kind of minification that happens. So this is the optimization and obfuscation to the classes that can occur when you do a build. So some of these can actually break the Spatial SDK. So one thing to note is if you have like a build like this, or you've grabbed this from a template, then your build type will probably look something like this already. I mean, one option is to just disable like the minification altogether and avoid the kind of problems that might occur with that. I guess the other option is if you want to switch that on, then you need to make sure that the ProGuard rules are set up correctly. So the ProGuard rules effectively tell it to, don't minify the Spatial SDK classes, and also don't warn about these things. So this is kind of the standard ProGuard rules. It only applies when minification happens during a particular release build. And I've added my own classes here as well because I've noticed that actually the Spatial SDK will try and load your classes by name, and that can cause errors as well. So if you're kind of building it for a release, then just be careful around this minification option and test things out properly. So I think so the step to build an APK is generally all built into the Android Studio to do this. And there's kind of menu option here. So the menu option to do that will be sort of generating assigned app bundle or APK. I mean, I guess I should have said at the beginning, I'm kind of assuming that your development environment is up and running when you're pressing play, that you have a debug version of your app going into the headset that's all functioning and working. So you've basically kind of proven your app or your development build is kind of up and running and fine in the headset. So then this step is basically producing the release version of that. So you want to go to the build menu, generate assigned app bundle or APK. When this first pops up, it'll probably default to the app bundle option. So make sure you select the right one and build the assigned APK you can deploy to a device and then switch to the next screen. Just gonna let me do it. And then we're into sort of key stores. Again, it's like a similar theme for all the different toolkits. So at first, you won't have any keys necessarily. So on the first time you see this screen, then what you want to do is create a new key store. So if you click on this button, then a new window will appear where you can then add in particular details. I think best practice really is to have your key store kind of outside of your project, keep it somewhere safe, and make sure it's backed up. Because bad things happen, you're going to lock yourself out of your app if you don't have these keys. So locate it. I think keeping a key store per app is probably best practice here for each project as well. And then generate, secure password for the key store, but also make sure the password for the key store is also the password for the key as well. It's kind of a nuance of the JKS toolkit that you need to set this up that way. I kind of leave the key 0 as the alias, so you can kind of leave that alone and then set the validity for 25 years. And then the certificate details in here, obviously relating to your organization or individuals, or adding the cert details in there. And then once you've done that, you'll be kind of back into the signing the bundle and generating it. And so you can remember the password. So if you're doing multiple builds and you're coming back in, then this is all going to be saved for you and you don't have to go over and over again. And then kind of the final step is checking the build variants. Of course, you need to select the release build variant at this point. I think note the destination folder. It doesn't always default to an obvious place. I have to go tracking it down, or it does actually output in the build. I can show you in a minute. But yeah, so once you've clicked the release, then click create and off you go. It'll run through the build process. Now I can quickly kind of show that in Studio. So I'm actually set here. So if I look at my build variant, so I've got the build variant set to be release in here. And then inside the build menu, I can go to generate signed app bundle or APK. As you can see, as described, the window's kind of popped up. I already have my keys generated here. Click next. It's going to put my files in output, which is inside the project, which isn't checked into GitHub. And then I can create it. And the build successful. So if I look in the outputs, then here is the release file, which is then kind of ready to go. I think there is one step that I recommend is that, so you don't necessarily need to always go through the menu every single time. I mean, that's an option. But I think the best thing is if you add some signing configuration into your build. So essentially what you can do is you can create a release section. And here I'm using the same process I was using to fetch the secrets. So like where the key stores are in the secret file. And basically load a signing configuration inside the build. And then inside the build types, you can specify a particular signing config for that as well. So this means that if you're doing automated builds or unattended builds, that this will happen automatically. And I think kind of one thing I encourage you to do this. Lost mouse. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so in the build is add these signing configurations here. Some issues. My and then either there's no option to kind of do a release build, but you can kind of double click control to give you some commands and then do assemble release, which will then do kind of the equivalent of running through all those screens, which is pretty handy. But I think the main thing to do is, set your app up here, target your Quest headset and do play as if you're in development mode. And then what that will do, it will take the minified release, signed released file and then push it to your headset. So it's kind of like the ideal way to check that your APK file is working fine before you upload it. And I think for the Spatial SDK, that's largely it. So I think then the workflow is just the same as with the other setups. So you kind of locate your build, upload the app from whatever the location is. Sorry, the location specified. Kick that off, and then you're kind of going into your screen to do the same process as we discussed for the other ones as well. Like I say, pretty short, but I think like the studio is kind of set up to be able to do these capabilities, and it's just a case of making sure the manifest is good, all the signing's done properly, and you've fully tested it on the headset.